The Mornington is synonymous with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So you would say this is the highest level of Pinot Noir out of Paringa Estate from now and ongoing?
In 2022 was so exceptional that maybe it's the year that we think about making the next level up.
Oh my God, it tastes delicious. That's what it tastes. Lindsay and Jamie from Paringa Estate are with us to go through not only the history of Paringa Estate, but also to talk about some really great vintages, some great wines for you and the family history behind it. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
First podcast?
Cheers, yes.
Definitely.
Okay. And thank you very much for both being here. Paringa Estate, located about, what is it? How long was it in the car? Hour 15 away?
From here, yes, an hour 15, yeah.
Yeah, so nice little trek, but well worth the visit to the cellar door. Let's go back, and while we do, let's have a taste of the Chardonnay in front of us. But can you please tell us about how you came to be?
I got introduced to wine during my degree or teacher training. And the first winery I went to was Ossica's, and this is in 1974, where they sold all their wine in bulk. I was just a beer drinker at that point, but was fascinated by the process, took bulk wine home, bottled it, drank quite a bit of it, and suddenly I was on a wine journey. My first posting as a teacher was to Rosebud High School, which was in the Mornington Peninsula. And in the first few weeks of teaching, I did a reconnaissance around the Mornington Peninsula looking for excursion places to take my Year 7 geography kids, 120 of them. And so I drove around the Red Hill Main Ridge area, and in the process I came across Main Ridge Estate, who were the first vineyard to be, or first winery they ended up being. I think LG Park planted their vineyard a few years earlier, but not many. I wanted to be a farmer, really. My father was a dairy farmer and sort of wisely didn't let me follow his footsteps. But I'd gone far enough in my childhood and evolution as a person to not want to be a city person, but wanted to be on some land and to be productive in some way. And so I had this dream of being able to plant vines and make wine and maybe follow what Main Ridge were really starting to do as well. And 10 years later, I started the process. So I bought the land where Paringa, where we are now, which was a derelict orchard, bought that in 1984 and started planting in 85. And here we are nearly 40 years later.
Well, I can tell that was an abbreviated version, but absolutely ripping. I want to say, from a storytelling point of view, that was pretty spot on. Thank you. Of course, you're 36 years old?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
So grew up on the vines, in the vines.
I did. Yeah, I think from when I was really little, I'd probably get out, and I remember my sister and I sort of going, because a lot of the property, the way it is now, is planted to vineyard, but when we were kids, there was parts that were still, orchard or bushland, or there was, raspberries, random things. We had farm animals everywhere, so it's changed a lot since when we were kids. But yeah, we used to love getting outside and running around and causing a muck. And when you grow up on a bit of land, it's a bit different to sitting at home and trying to find ways to entertain yourselves. We had a great time.
We have a Chardonnay in front of us. I'm sure you do speak about this to anyone who listens, but you said this is a cracking wine. Tell us why.
Yeah, so this particular Chardonnay, I think it's what Dad's sort of alluding to is, on the show circuit, not that that's the be all and end all, but it's done very well. Picked up a number of trophies, particularly in the Victorian Wine Show. 2 years in a row, got Best Chardonnay, Best White of the show. The first year got Best Wine of the show, and then the same vintage the next year, Best Chardonnay, Best White Wine of the show.
Back
to back, yeah.
For the same wine. So we actually hadn't released it, and rarely do I ever put a wine in a show 2 years in a row, because often you've moved on and start selling it and you move on to the next one. But so this was quite an unusual situation. But and it's our oldest block of Chardonnay. It's our single vineyard wine from Paringa. It's made in sort of a Burgundian way, if I can say that. A whole bunch pressed, wild yeast fermented. It's put through full malo most years.
A lot of solids,
lot of solids. So we're looking for that sort of funky character that you get in barrel fermented Chardonnays, and this has got it in spades, I think.
A bit of lees. A lot of lees, yeah.
It's definitely it's a character that we see this. We call it funk, but for a lack of a better term, there's some sulfite, but it's also leesy wild yeast characters that come through, particularly in this block that we don't get from other blocks, even within the vineyard. Our home vineyard treat them the same. This wine year in, year out produces it, some years more than others. And this year, we got a lot of it. And it can be polarizing, I think, sulfides and reduction in Chardonnay, but it's something we really like. And obviously in this particular year, we got it at a level that a lot of people have liked.
Yeah, well, us included.
Yeah, you see this with a huge potential, even 2021, to keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, I think in 10 or 15 years, this wine will still be going extremely well.
You are right. He really has that Burgundian note to it. The match strike.
Yeah, the matchstick.
Yeah.
Burnt match. It's
wonderful.
When I was making our wines, Pinot was my focus, and I was looking for the right time to pick Pinot. And that actually was to the detriment of the Chardonnay, because often they'd be ripening close, but I'd pick the Pinot first, which ultimately meant the Chardonnay was picked probably a week too late, maybe. In 2011, I got an assistant winemaker in from Lindsay Estate, and he came over and said, can we make some sort of changes to how you're making Chardonnay? And I said, sure, yes, I'm all open to change. And so suddenly that meant picking the Chardonnay before Pinot, back then I was making probably wines of 14.5%. I'm talking back in the early 2000s through to 2010. So they were big and bold. And Lewin were at the more refined level, although their flavours are still big. So he said, let's pick earlier and let's just work on the barrel stirring and the finesse of the wine. He continued the way that I had made this wine, but made it better. But our other Chardonnays, we went to no Malo and some wild yeast, some inoculated. And so our estate and our peninsula wines, he markedly changed the style for the better. And Jamie, once he's come on board, and Craig taught him as well, and he's followed the process.
So I guess that would have meant earlier picking, higher acidity, fresher wines, lower alcohol, more elegant, more the Burgundian approach, isn't it? Yeah,
and it's the modern Australian way too. And
that's true.
We've gone with that style. This is Jamie's work, so it's...
cheers to you, Jamie. Look, there's the proof. Loved it.
Cheers. Thanks for coming in.
Cheers. So the Mornington is synonymous with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. We've already had your delicious Chardonnay, and thank you for the experience, but I'm super excited. I mean, I'm a Pinot Noir guy, and we've got 2 bottles in front of us. Can you explain to us what they are before we individually go through their story and, some of the history behind it with the Paringa Estate?
Yes. Well, the older wine there is a 2010 The Paringa, which is our single vineyard Pinot from our home vineyard, which we've made since the year 2000. Prior to that, I called it Estate Pinot because it was from our estate. As our production grew and we gained more vineyards, we needed to focus what we were making from my oldest vineyard. And so we introduced, it was first called Reserve Pinot, and then we changed it to The Paringa, I think, in around 2008. So that's a 2010 wine. So it's
how old the vineyards?
The vineyard, that Pinot was planted in 1988, so 35 years old now. Yeah. So they're mature vines now, but they also were quite mature in 2010. The reason I chose that vintage 10 was a great vintage for us, ideal growing conditions, and the wine is now 14 or 15 years old, which I think is a good point to see Pinots from Mornington or from anywhere really.
That's definitely on our right-hand side, I can tell.
To evaluate how they're travelling. The other one is a new wine which we've just released, and it's called LJM, which is an ode to both Jamie and myself. They're our initials of our names, so it's the connection between father and son, and it's a very, very special small amount or small quantity of single vineyard wine, again from our original plantings.
I remember, if I have the right image, going to Paringa Estate, and you had, I think, the vineyards going cover crops and some roses.
Roses at the ends of the rose, yeah.
And those perfume of roses is coming into the vineyards, but obviously the roses at the beginning of the vineyard is for the different. It's not for flavoring, not for aromas in the wine. But maybe you want to explain a little bit why that's.
They were a European tradition. Roses were planted in European Burgundy vineyards back in the day, 100, 200 years ago. It was used as a disease detection for black spot and various mildews that vines are also susceptible to. So it's like the canary in the mine shaft. It's a warning before your main crop might be in peril with disease. So back in the day, again, the vineyard people would treat their vines with whatever methods they have to try and ward off disease. These days, you go to Burgundy or Barolo and you don't see any roses. They've removed them, but funny, the New World, we continue these traditions, and I must say mainly it's near our cellar door in our restaurant where people see them and they're pretty.
So let's talk about the Pinot, and how would you like to start? Because we do have obviously such complex wines, but so different because the age difference. Should we start with the 2010? Just to go back to that history a little bit more, this is showing so beautifully, and all of your wines being under screw top. Do you think if you were under cork, how expressively different would these two be? And we can only, I guess, hypothesize.
If they were good corks, the wines may look similar. Back when we made the switch in around 2003, three, I think we made the change. We had issues with random oxidation with our corks. Australia was seen to be getting bad corks. So it wasn't just cork taint, it was random oxidation. I believe random oxidation was an even bigger problem because it aged the wines differently. Every bottle became different. And we had to withdraw some of our estate Chardonnay because of random oxidation in 2003, the 2003 wine. And so once we went to screw cap, we don't see any of that anymore. I suspect the cork companies have improved their systems now, and the corks aren't as bad as what they were that long ago, but screw caps have proven themselves to us that they age the wines consistently and over a long period. And
another Australian invention, so we'll take it.
We'll take it, yes.
We'll take it, absolutely.
You bottle much larger format bottles. I believe we had some magnums at the restaurant before.
Yes. And originally we had to continue using corks because they didn't make screw cap magnums, but now they do. So our magnums we continue to bottle are also under screw cap.
That would be interesting under the magnums. See the evolution on that.
Yes.
You've pulled this one out of the cellar for us, and we're super grateful. And of course, we'll speak about the new range and the other Pinot in front of us, your latest release as well. I love finding out about what's under the hood with Paringa Estate, how your museum of wines. You said you love Burgundy, but what do you have in the personal cellar, and what's Paringa Estate holding?
We keep a lot of old wine. So way back in the early days, I'm talking back in the 90s, I had to sell the wine because I was trying to make a living, and that was hard financially. But I used to put aside 4 cases originally of any wine to keep it for the future. That became 8, a layer. Now we keep at least 16. If we think the wine is very special, we'll keep up to half a pallet.
Wow.
So we've got a separate dedicated cool room now that we keep all our older wine, and there is a lot. That becomes the benefit of our restaurant and our cellar door, where we have a back vintage tasting on the first Sunday in December every year. So our wine club people can come and taste, a range
40,
of
50 wines, yeah.
and going back over
December.
20 years. They can be tasting a 20-year-old Pinot.
Before they buy it, yeah. Or looking at a wine that maybe they bought 10 years ago and they don't want to open it yet, they can taste it and go, oh, that's, yeah.
So there's great value in having the foresight to put aside your wines because you then see them evolve.
And speaking of going from 2010, where, this is a full Lindsay hard work, 23 hours in the vines, fair bit of influence in this one, Jamie, I would imagine. Take us through the current release and something I know from speaking to Nick, who's part of your team, is very excited about.
Yeah, so the other wine we've got here is a new release wine that we've done from the 2022 vintage, which I guess sort of came to be when we were doing, we've just started at the moment for the current vintage, our classification tastings, where aside from vintage, which is obviously getting in there and physically doing the work, getting the grapes, making the wine, blending is the next most fun time of the year because we keep every single parcel of fruit that comes into the winery from every vineyard. We have 8 vineyards, all in Red Hill that we look after. Every single parcel of fruit, obviously there's variety, but there's clone, there's different blocks on different aspects. We keep them all separate through the entirety of their lifetime in barrel. And then, so for Pinot, we have sort of somewhere between 30 and 40 different batches. And we sit down at this time of year, we taste them all blind, we talk about them, we score them, and we start trying to shape the blends that we have. And I think 2022, we were just so blown away by the quality across the board that sort of triggered something that we'd been thinking about for a while, but it was sort of, the next level. We've had the Paringa Pinot for a number of years now, and I think we thought, what's the next thing from there? And we thought the quality of the wine in 2022 was so exceptional that maybe it's the year that we think about making the next level up. And that's what we've done. The
white label, that's what I'm now referencing it as, only because it's sitting in front of me with the white and unique label to the brand. So it gets its own marketing piece. So you would say this is the highest level of Pinot Noir out of Paringa Estate from now and ongoing?
That's right, yes. So,
wow.
And it's got a fair price tag on it as well.
Well, that's fine. We pay for high quality wines.
That's right. Our single vineyard's been in the 100, 120 mark for a while. And lots of other producers have come up to that sort of level with pricing. We've thought, well, let's make our pinnacle higher, and we think the quality is there. So this is the first $250 bottle of Pinot from Mornington.
Yeah, well,
and it's something that we're very comfortable in saying it's only going to be in the best years. It's not going to be just this year we'll make it. We haven't made one since, but there won't be one this year. It's purely going to be reserved for the best of the best.
Oh, cool.
Where we think it's, it's at the mark.
Just stamp of approval. Yeah, I love that. I let the master speak about what it is. But yeah, I mean, there's, for me, just so much complexity in there. It's so fruit forward, of course, and showing so young. It's, once again, 2010. I'd love to see what this looks like. But here in front of us, just such a palatable Pinot. Carlos?
I think that's to be seen, when we have a wine with 14 years, that obviously, as you see the evolution, you see a lot of tertiary aromas, you see, and still a little bit of fruit, so there's still so much going on. But with the 2022, I think is still so vibrant, so energetic. Is hard. It's hard to tell right now that this is an amazing, almost amazing. I think it's so youthful, so young. So I would want to see this, another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10.
The winemaker's worst question. They hate this. But you're releasing it as a 2022. And when someone goes out the door and they say, oh, by the way, we don't need to drink this now, we're going to put this in the cellar. Lindsay, Jamie, what year should I chuck a tag on this and when should this be opened? And if I was to have 2 bottles and I got to explore a little bit, what do you reckon?
Yeah, well, I think your second point's a good option. It's something that I definitely like to do where I can afford it is get at least 2 bottles because, like we've just said, I think this wine is very approachable now, and it's definitely going to change and evolve over time and probably develop different layers of complexity. But I think I always enjoy drinking good wine young. I think a good wine can be drunk young and it can also have the potential to age. And I think that's the way to go about it. In terms of when to age it till, maybe that's something my dad can answer.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I think good Pinot, you shouldn't be drinking it until it's 4 or 5 years old, maybe. But by the same token, we make them so you can drink them younger, because it's just a proven fact that a lot of the wine is drunk quite young. But the more you pay for something, maybe you value it and you'll put it away.
You treasure it.
It's a great
in
point.
a different way.
You treasure it more. So hopefully that happens.
Becomes something for a special occasion. It's not something that you will be drinking every day.
What I love in this, it's lots of fruit there, but there's tannin structure there too. It's got robustness behind it, partly from whole bunch and partly just from the natural tannins of the fruit. Probably back 20 years ago, I was mostly making 14.5% wines because I was tasting the flavours in the fruit and I was watching for the peak of the flavour before they started to shrivel, and that ended up at 14.5, and we weren't worried so much about alcohol back then. But it's certainly come into focus in more recent time.
We're a bit, loved up because we've got young kids, but it must be lovely watching your son speak about something that you built way back when. It only happens when you have a child, and I say now because Carlos has got it, but it must be nice. I just watching Jamie speak about it. Must be a beautiful experience.
It is, and he's learning to speak in a very eloquent way. I think a few years ago he was quite nervous, and it comes with maturity and understanding what you've got in front of you, what you've made, and what's involved, and the family thing as well. At an event we had last week, he spoke about the efforts and my history in a way that I've never heard him speak like that before, and it was really touching.
I think I see a little tear there on the corner of your eye.
Almost, yes.
And going back as well, I mean, you've got early memories of your dad working ridiculous hours in the vines. At the time, probably being a bit like, would love to throw a cricket ball around, but, now seeing literally the fruits of the labour, it must be nice to work alongside your dad.
Yeah, having said that, cricket's probably his number 2 passion behind wine, so that was never a problem. He'd coach the local cricket team and all that sort of stuff. But
did you ever make a cricket pitch down the middle of 2 vines? Little Christmas Day tradition?
Not quite, but he'd be taking me to the nets and all that sort of thing all the time. So
I remember my father made me a cricket pitch inside the chook yard of my grandparents' house, or their chook yard, I should say. So, we spent many of an hour practicing there.
But back to your question, I think as a young person, it's probably harder to appreciate what your parents or other people are achieving and what they're doing in their profession. And I think something I mentioned at the lunch the other day, my sister and I growing up watching my dad, he worked hard, but we had this, strange feeling that it was really normal for your dad to be a winemaker and to be constantly going to these wine shows and cleaning up trophies, which now me as a winemaker living in that experience, it's not normal.
It's not that easy.
And what he achieved with someone with no viticultural or winemaking background or training to establish, what Paringa is today. I'm incredibly proud and, in moving forward, indebted to what he's done. And I think that was something I spoke about the other day with this new release wine, the LJM. Yes, it's a collaboration between Dad and I, and it's our initials, but it's also his initials, L, Lindsay, James, McCall. And I think, moving into the future, this is something that I will reflect on. And I think, I look at myself as a caretaker and a bit of a blip on the map in terms of I hope Paringa will live for a lot longer than my lifetime. And I think, but the history of my dad establishing the place and putting in the hard yards to get it to where it is, that's where I see this wine. It's a reflection of him. And I'm just there to help